Hello again, cranking out a few videos today. On my RPG Gods video, there was a user by the name of Screaming Doom that said that he wanted me to try to do some video about magic and like the source of magic and how that kind of gets glossed over in a lot of RPGs and a lot of RPG settings. And I think to some degree, I think people like just want to kind of gloss that over. Where, maybe there's like a sentence here and then that's it. They don't really discuss it anymore. But because of my my liking of mythology and deities interacting with the setting or being very distant but still there, I think it's an interesting topic to think about because different settings have different types of magic, and RPGs have different types of magic. There's a psionics, divine, arcane. Some of them kind of mix things together. Some of them have different ways of handling it. And what is the source? And I was just trying to think. This is just off the cuff of what kind of sources of magic there could be. And depending on how the cosmology of the setting is set up and how everything works together can really change and affect how magic works. I think my cat's destroying something, so I'll be right back. Alright, sorry about that. So, the source of magic. Depending on what kind of magic you have in your setting, it can really vary from setting to setting. It really can be very different. So you have to look at what do you want out of magic? What do you want it to do? Do you want there to be any consequences for it? How does it affect people that use it? How does it affect the people that it is used upon? And there's a lot of questions you can really think about that. And if you go through and you think, let's take one example. Magic is a form of energy. It's some naturally occurring phenomenon that just exists within the world, or the gods made the world and that was just part of the world. It's just, it's kind of like money or something like that, where, it's not really good or evil, it's really how you use it, something like that. So it can be just like a natural phenomenon that's just part of the natural way the world works. And if you have a very distant set of deities, or in your setting, deities don't exist at all, that could make a lot of sense. It's like electricity or any sort of other sort of natural phenomenon, gravity. It's just magic. You can take it a different way where there's a source of magic. There is some sort of divine being or multiple beings that they give that energy off. They're kind of like a magic battery, if you will, that they just give magic to the world and they can influence magic. Maybe if you do not appease that deity, then you won't be able to use that magic, or it'll, basically just cut you off from the source. Which, depending on how you do your gods, can be a lot like divine magic, where, if you're a paladin or a cleric and you start doing horrible things that isn't, within your alignment or, ethos or whatever, your strictures for your faith, the god can cut you off as well. So having a deity that has magic as a domain could be interesting. You could really kind of mess with things. And, maybe that god is very fickle. So maybe he just, I don't know if gods sleep, but, he wakes up one day and decides that, I'm just going to cut off magic from 20 magic users today. Just because I feel like being kind of a prick. So, there's that possibility, I guess. There's maybe the philosophy that magic comes from within. Each person, each living thing generates some sort of magical field, or they exude magical energy. Maybe there's things that can feed off that energy or absorb it, or if you really wanted to take it even a step further, that could explain why there are animal sacrifices, human sacrifices, because they are taking that energy and using it for some other purpose. A lot of the sword and sorcery kind of genres have like a lot of sacrifices and things. They take it in a different vein, though. Kind of like the divine beings or the source of magic. There can be like fallen angels, devils, demigods, things like giants and things that have been the enemies of gods. Basically the antithesis of the gods, or the tails to their heads. They can be the source of magic. I know the game Sorcerer is basically the magic is all about summoning demonic beings and making them do what you want them to do, and that can be, your magic system, where there's like there's lots of ritual, and if you mess up the rituals, you get possessed and you die, something like that, where there's a lot of nasty side effects. There's what's interesting about magic is it really is only limited by what you can come up with. If you have laws for magic, think about each of those laws and think how it could be maybe slightly different. Maybe, like in a lot of fantasy settings, metal is kind of like a dampening agent or whatever for magic, where magic has to pass through it. I know in the Novus RPG I'm playtesting, there's impedance, which basically means you have to pay like extra spell points to cast an armor. You can still cast a spell, it's just harder to cast. It costs more power to cast spells. But like there's other things like divine magic, where you could things just happen. So many times per day things can happen. There's a lot of things to really think about magic. Things like Vancian magic system, where you have so many spell slots, and once you cast it, it's erased from your memory, and then you have to rememorize it. Versus kind of like a D&D sorcerer-esque kind of magic system, where a certain number of spells, you have a certain number of spells you can cast per day, but you can cast any of them you like. You don't have to pre-select. You don't have to memorize. It's kind of like from the gut. You cast whatever the hell you want to. And I tend to like magic systems that are like that. But again, I can understand how people have gotten accustomed to the Vancian magic, and if you like it, you like it. That's cool. I don't hate it. It's just I like to be more freewheeling, and it's nice to have a spell for different occasions. But I guess that can be a balancing factor in and of itself. It's like, oh, if I just would have memorized that today, we would have lived, but I didn't, so now we're all dead. So there's lots to think about with magic, and I know there's more free-form magic systems with RPGs, like Barbarians of Lemuria, for instance, where you pick your costs and you describe things, and there's some sort of vague limitations, like how much damage spells can do, or roughly what they are, and the GM and the storyteller kind of go back and forth and try to figure out how the spell actually works, and then it happens. And that can be a lot of fun, having a free-form magic system. When I ran that Shadow Children game that I was talking about, I used a little bit more of a free-form magic system, where I would have a base spell, and I would ask them, how do you want to change it? Do you want to twist it in some way? Do you want the fireballs to be like screaming bunnies or something? Because it's a kid's game, they can do all kinds of weird stuff like that. But it's interesting if you think about it. I don't know. Do you guys have a favorite magic system? Do you have the source of magic? Do you have that figured out in your setting, or is it kind of vague and kind of off the scene, and you really don't even, like, the thought maybe crosses your mind that you're not really even interested in where it comes from? It works, so I'm going to use it, and I don't care about the consequences. Take just another thought popped in my head, like post-apocalyptic settings, where maybe there's like the defiler magics, where the when you cast a spell, it literally just drains the life force out of everything around it and kills grass, kills animals. Maybe things become sick. Maybe the local town that's close by. All the infants that are 1 year and older die. Something horrible like that. You really can crank up the creepy factor if you want to with magic systems. Maybe those that use magic eventually will go mad and be possessed or whatever, or you can bring in some like Cthulhu kind of going crazy kind of stuff, where you have to, dabbling in the dark arts can mess you up. You might be in the insane asylum for the rest of your life because you didn't write the magic sigils right, or someone broke the circle when you were summoning something, or you really can. There's a lot of different ways you can handle it, and I know a lot of different settings have handled it different. I know Some settings have used magic to sort of replace technology, where it's kind of a sci-fantasy thing where, all the lights on the street are, little elemental fairies or something that have been ensorcelled to stay there, and they give off light, or, you know, electricity is really just magic. There's magic fuel that fills the cars, you can do that, I guess, if you want to do that sort of thing. I don't know. There's a lot of different ways you can look at magic and how it affects things. There's also low magic settings, or no magic settings, where there really isn't any magic at all. It's really, it's all flesh getting chopped up by swords, and the politics and everything, social class, and if you're going with a medieval European kind of feel, it can be downright nasty. Lots of diseases killing people. There can be magical diseases where, maybe something's been changed or mutated by magic, and it just kills all the magic users, or kills certain types of animals, kind of like a genocide of certain species. That would be kind of nasty. If you take the Terry Goodkind novels, where there are some things that, like, if you start to kill off certain types of magic, there's creatures that literally depend on that magic. Like, it doesn't well up from inside of them. They sort of absorb it from the natural world. And if magic stops being or stops existing in certain areas, those creatures, even though they might have food, water, and everything else, might just suddenly die off, or die off within a week, because they don't have that magical energy that they absorb. It kind of brings into that idea about the ecosystem, and if you change one thing, there could be horrible consequences further up the food chain, for what you thought might be some insignificant little thing. I'll just give you an example. We have these stink bugs that I've lived in Western Pennsylvania like all my life, and the last 2 or 3 years, these things are freaking everywhere. They come in the house all the time. They just show up they're all over the place. And I think they're some sort of carryover sort of bug from some other country, and they're running wild, and there's no natural predator. So, I mean, if you can take that in some sort of magical way, then, that'd be horrible. Magical stink bugs? I don't know, that would be kind of a nasty thing, I think. So there's freeform magic, there's, ritual magic, there is the sort of wizard, verbal component, semantic component, spell components like little feathers and things. We'll just take spell components for an example. If you really take spell components and maybe just make them even more extreme than, like, let's say D&D, that can really change the flavor of a setting too, because if you can't find those spell components, you can't cast that spell. So maybe there's adventures to find spell components, and well, just think about spell components in and of themselves. Why do you need spell components? Do they have sort of innate magic to them? Why do you need the Eye of Newt? Maybe the Newt is one of those creatures that, for whatever reason, stored the magical energy within their eyes, or that magical energy, affects things in a different way because of what they are, what they eat. Maybe they eat different creatures that have some sort of innate magical ability, or maybe it's just the shape of the thing. If it's a feather, maybe that's a component for a flying spell, and it's just the form of the thing, or the shape of the thing, that gives it magical properties. I'm sure you could do more research into things. I don't know. I tend to try to keep that sort of stuff in the fantasy kind of genre, and not really big into the whole real world thing. But that's just my own personal thing about that. So I don't know. What else could you think about with magic? You can take, like, monuments for example, like Stonehenge, or some sort of magical circle that's made out of stones, where that is how you kind of harness magic out of the earth. Kind of like the ley lines, and there's like rivers of magical energy that are under the ground, and you have to harness that energy somehow, and these magical ruins kind of do that. They kind of suck it out of the ground, and that's a way to harness it. Maybe if you are at a nexus of two ley lines or more, it's very powerful because you have the ability to suck the magical energy pretty much out of all the different areas that are around you, perhaps, or maybe different monuments in different areas kind of focus that energy, and if you put a big one in the nexus point, it literally can suck all the energy out of all the different monuments that are around, religious sites, whatever you want to call those sorts of things, magical foci, something like that. So there really is a lot that I can think of, like with the whole magical artifact, places that suck up magic kind of thing. With the midnight setting, he has the Chorus or the Black Mirrors, and they suck all the energy out, and there's sacrifices made to them. They have to be fed with watered and fed with blood, and all of the souls and the magical energy of everything that dies around this thing gets focused off to Isildur, the god of the setting. So you really can do a lot with this stuff. If you wanted to make a unique setting, it'd be kind of cool to come up with the source of magic and how it works. That would be like, how is your setting different than everyone else's? But I'd like to hear if you guys have any additional ideas on magic systems, how magic works, the source of magic. If you like more freeform stuff, or if you like, very, Vancian magic, or perhaps skills for each spell, that you have, or maybe, some sort of like idea, like you have to take talents or feats or whatever for each spell that you take. There's a lot of things you can really think about magic and how it works. I know there's been a lot of videos of different RPG systems that do it in different ways. Ars Magica, Nobilis, those sorts of games, where they can take things and turn them on their head, and things like Hero that are really involved, but you really can make any sort of magical spell you want, as long as you just build it right. So I don't know, guys. Just me rambling about magic. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll talk to you guys later.